I have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
Welcome to the Star Wars Station Communication Podcast. I'm your host, Carter, and if you've come looking for Star Wars news and commentary, you have come to the right place. So we're avid Star Wars fans. We run a Star Wars podcast. We've been Star Wars fans for the majority of both of our lives. And so we are obviously plugged into what's happening in Star Wars news, and we are aware of what is happening to Jake Lloyd's situation. We're trying to keep ourselves informed, and it's just really terrible stuff. Jake Lloyd, of course, famously playing young Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace, and he also infamously received a lot of backlash surrounding that role and that performance, almost all of which were out of his control at the ripe old age of 8 years old. And so we're keeping Jake Lloyd in our thoughts and our prayers. We're thinking about his family and as they struggle with his mental health. And we're going to talk about that more later in the news section. But I just thought it was important since this is such fresh news. And Jake Lloyd has been a part of Star Wars for so long that it was worth mentioning. Aside from our news segment coming up, we've got a lot of meat for our podcast because we got a double dose of the Bad Batch. It came to us today, and it was a total doozy. There was a ton in there. We got a fan favorite clone back in the mix. We got a lot of development for the guys, and so I cannot wait to hop into talking about this episode, but I'm not alone when talking about this episode. I'm joined by my longtime co-host, the aloof assassin, Colin Archer.
Hey, Carter, man, it's glad to be here once again. This is going to be a great show. Lots of stuff to talk about. 2 episodes. Man, who'd have thought that we'd have gotten 2 on one day? I'm so glad. There's a lot to these. Again, you got to peel back the layers to get down in there. But I'm ready to get going.
Yeah, we have, like you said, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on with these episodes. And these are probably the meatiest episodes we've gotten since the season opener episodes. And these episodes are still pretty meaty. So the first episode is called Infiltration, and it opens up not with the guys. It opens up with Rex and his group of clones. And so we see immediately a ton of characters from season 2, from season 1, from the Clone Wars, who are all making a big comeback in this episode of the season. They've been gone for the first few episodes of the season, and so now we're getting them back. The first one back is Rex. And so we knew Rex was going to come back. We always hear mention of him. We talked about him a lot last episode because Echo was gone and we didn't have any Rex. And so we both wondered, where was he? But we also got back Hauser, and that guy was a fan favorite clone from the Ryloth episode. That was an awesome episode, and he was an awesome clone to see brought back. We also got Raxus Senator Singh back, and we got Senator Chuchi back, both of them fighting for the clones.
Yeah, lots of nostalgia here, and it's great to see that, even a show that's titled The Bad Batch, it's not just them who are putting forth these efforts out in the galaxy, right? Lots of really cool stuff going on.
Yes, I absolutely agree. There's what we're seeing right here, right now, is this early formation of the rebellion, early formation of the cell-like nature that the Alliance used. And this is the groundwork for that. I mean, we're still in 18 BBY, and so we've got a long way to go before that first Death Star is blown up. But there had to be 18 years worth of groundwork laid that allowed Luke to blow that Death Star up.
Yeah, they had the resources.
Exactly. They had to have all those resources. They had to build all that infrastructure. They had to get the X-Wings, and they had to get the commanders, and they had to get the base, and they had to get the mechanics. And it's just over and over. A rebellion isn't built in a day. And so...
Yeah, and the reality is all these folks are the forefathers of that rebellion. Senator Chuchi, there's a statue of her somewhere on Hosnian Prime.
Right. And there's a very interesting... I thought that... So this is a theme that's been visited a little bit in Star Wars before, in different books, comic books, but this is, to my knowledge, the first time we're really seeing it materialize on screen, is separatists continuing their struggle for independence. They're now just, against the empire instead of against the Republic, and it kind of legitimizes the CIS and the separatist struggle from the Clone War, so much so that almost certainly there is a strain of rebels within the Rebel Alliance that saw the Alliance as a legitimate heir and successor to the separatist movement. With the Republic being a direct predecessor to the Empire, it's not hard to make that connection that many separatists then became rebels and then became Alliance leaders. And that was, before we got Andor, that was ostensibly Cassian Andor's backstory, is that he was originally a separatist, started fighting for the separatists at age 6, and then, throughout the rise of the Empire, fought them for the whole 19 years. That's changed since Andor, or has at least been reinterpreted somewhat. But we can see this really, really clearly established line that we can draw between the Confederacy of Independent Systems and the Rebel Alliance being formed in this conversation.
Yeah, as the adage goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And regardless of what Senator Chuchi thought of the separatists during the war, it's very clear that the Empire is the bigger threat, and that their independence is now something that Chuchi says she wants herself. She wanted Pantora to be a member of the Republic, but she doesn't want them to have no voice in this empire, and so she has been moved to the separatist cause as well. And at this time period, there's nothing but the separatist cause, because the Clone War is so fresh on everybody's minds. The Empire's atrocities have only begun, and so most of the galaxy is this is a benevolent empire. That's not even just that it's in many parts of the galaxy that we see during A New Hope. People are ambivalent towards the Empire. Most people are embracing the Empire still. It's only been a year. And so for the Clone War to be that fresh on people's minds, and for the Empire to have that much momentum, it shows a lot of character for Senator Chuchi to still be against the Empire and to be fervently opposing the Empire in this manner. And it shows that important groundwork laid for the rebellion.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, there is a lot to be said about this. We need to do an episode on just this topic alone. I mean, because you can get into stuff like, the Separatists, they're all machinations of the Sith. And so now you've got this Rebel Alliance aligning with victims of Sith machinations, like I just said. Mm-hmm, and and what it really boils down to me, is staying true to your convictions, right? Having a good foundation of moral values, because even though, like you said, these are the first onset of the Imperials, from some people's perspective, the war is over. And the Empires are the savior. They stop the droids from wrecking their homes. But on the other side, they're like, these these clones, we're just going to throw them in the dustbin of history and not even think about them. Convert some of them to operatives and just utilize them mercilessly. And Senator Chuchi, like I said, is sticking to her moral convictions and wanting to raise them up and not just throw them away, recognize their contributions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she knows what the clones sacrificed for the Republic. And we saw that previously. And so in Season 2, when we have the Senator Chuchi-centered episodes, we know that she is now marked by the Empire for assassination, because they go after her in those episodes to have her assassinated. And we see she was going to be assassinated by a clone. He killed himself in that episode. And now there's a new assassin, another assassin, this time trying to target Senator Singh. And he comes out of the woodwork and shoots at the senator, doesn't make it, or doesn't shoot at the senator, is detected before he can shoot at the senator, and flees, is caught by the clones, and they refer to him as their shadow. And they know they've ran into these assassins before. We know they ran into them on Coruscant. And so this is kind of a wink, nudge, nudge to the term shadow troopers, which were, they were really popular. The thing that makes me think of shadow troopers the first is the Force Unleashed video game. They were an exceptionally popular enemy from the Force Unleashed video game.
Yeah, again, that was in my twilight time of being in the military. I don't remember much of that.
Well, it doesn't. In name only. are they similar.
Okay.
Because the Shadow Troopers from that video game are just stormtroopers in black armor. And they have been canonized since then. They just aren't in very much.
So, yeah, adjacent, right? But, man, I got to say, the music when these Shadow Troopers, for lack of a better term, or operatives, right? That music is amazing. It makes these guys seem really badass.
Yeah,
and they are.
It does.
They do really cool stuff.
Yeah, and they're very interesting because we see a lot of tension between the assassin and Wolf. And I want to talk about what the evidence for that tension may be. It's really, really interesting, the way that they've made these clones out and the way that they're very clearly brainwashed, more than the chip just does for Order 66, or more than a general clone like Cody or Wolf or Rex are. And so they have something more going on with them. So we see the clones at their monastery. We see the clones at their new base, which is the Teth Monastery. Their outpost is based in the Teth Monastery that we see from the original Clone Wars movie that aired in theaters back in 2007. And we also see it very, very briefly in the Ahsoka show that just came out last year. And so this is kind of the year of Teth. Like this was a planet that didn't come up until the Clone Wars movie, and is now it's gotten in two things, and this is a really good full circle for the clones. When we got first introduced to clones with personality and clones with humanity in the Clone Wars movie, and now we're getting to see them really make their final stand against the Empire out of this base that we got to see for the first time with them. And so with the introduction of the character Rex is also the introduction of Teth. And so I thought that was a really nice rhyme right there.
Yeah, it really is. And they telegraph in these scenes and set up that I think the culmination of this little arc is going to be is assaulting Tantus, right? And another thing I want to mention is you got to really, again, peel back the layers to learn about what this planet is, Teth. I think a layman or somebody not really paying attention could easily fall into a trap that this is Tatooine. It looks a lot like Jabba's palace or some sort of Bomar Mug establishment, right?
Right. Yes, it does. And it's that same problem that you have visually made me initially feel like, whoa, what's this Hutt palace? And then I was like, oh wait, this is obviously Teth for a split second. So I can see how people could fall into that. I can totally see that. So we cut to Tantus for just a moment to see that another Shadow Trooper, Assassin Clone Trooper has been activated. Nothing really beyond that other than a clone commando saying, hey, here's your mission.
So these guys are just chilling out all over the galaxy waiting for orders. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like some Bourne Identity thing, or you just get a phone call, all right, you're activated, get after it. And they got standing orders to go after Omega that they figure out. It's crazy that these guys are just out there waiting on it.
It is. And just doing all kinds of missions, not just seeking Omega. They went to assassinate Singh. You have to think about what other sabotage or assassination missions does the Empire have these guys on. I mean, they're basically completely disposable. These guys are as good as droids to the Empire.
And the galaxy's huge.
So,
there's hundreds of these guys out there, potentially.
Yep. So that, as you said, in the next scene, they find out that Omega is on the data puck along with Senator Singh. So they understand that the assassin has been tasked with killing Singh, but also another target of his is Omega. And so we then see all of the characters go out and take Echo's ship to Rex's base, because Rex gets a hold of them, says, we need to talk to you. And so the Bad Batch loads up into Echo's ship and heads for Rex's base. And that base being the outpost on Teth. I really was curious about this scene only because why did they all take Echo's ship? I didn't ever find a justification for that on why they didn't take the Bad Batch's ship or they all rode together or whatever. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Came out of nowhere for me that they all loaded onto this new ship that we hadn't seen before.
Echo's ship is awesome. It's huge. That thing is so cool.
It is awesome. I really, really like the design of the ship. And we talked about it last week. I think that it's a Ralph McQuarrie sketch design that has been repurposed, is my guess.
And it's not even the coolest ship in this episode. Or is it the next
No,
one?
it's
I don't
not.
remember.
It's not the cool. You're right, because there's a much cooler one. So Omega is sitting in the back seat of this ship, leaned back with a toothpick in her mouth, sitting just like Crosshair. And Crosshair's doing the same thing. He's doing his Crosshair pose. Well, this is beginning to get to the point where Omega is literally a mimic. And so far as she is mimicking Crosshair's mannerisms in this scene, not just, oh, she learned a lot from Tech, or, oh, she knows how to do this from Wrecker, and then what's she going to mimic from Crosshair, and she's asking me all these sniping questions. Well, it leads me to believe that this mimicking is there's more to it than it just being part of her character. I think it has to have to do with her force sensitivity with her imp count. There has to be some kind of force trait that allows her to pick up skills from other people easier and faster, because she has not been with Crosshair very long, and they focused heavily on the fact that she was mimicking him.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Those thoughts were ripped out of my head almost, Carter. But as a quick aside, kids do this all the time. They repeat what you say. Younger kids do it more. But even my daughter, who would be almost around this age, I don't know how old she is. My daughter's
Omega's
not this
14.
old. Yeah, she's not that old, so maybe not. But yeah, she's a little bit too old to do some sort of like innate mimicking that a younger child would do.
Right.
So
a young child is unconsciously doing. They're not. They don't realize they're mimicking you.
But to speculate a little bit, if she were to get a Jedi Master and what she were mimicking him and stuff, we got to be real careful. And if she gets a Jedi Master, if he has some sort of dark tendencies or something, because you could also make a argument if she's able to mimic and learn these things like by osmosis, if you will, just by being around these guys. She also can amplify that in a way because she's got some adeptitude to her capabilities in learning different things, that she's able to learn things faster. It is a truncated thing, but these guys have spent many more years learning to be pilots and tech adepts and strategic thinking than she has, right? And so she's been able to pick it up. I don't know about master these skills, but become an adept at these skills in a much quicker pace than most other clones.
Yeah. I mean, these guys have had extensive training and have been genetically disposed to doing these things, and Omega still does a pretty good job by coming in behind them. And so there's something to this. They want us to know about this. They want us to focus on this. And so Omega's mimicry really is going to become a plot point here soon. So I didn't cross my mind when Hauser was on screen until they got together and Hauser starts talking about his history with Crosshair on Ryloth. And that was a big deal. Obviously that would be difficult for Hauser to get. Crosshair is an effective stranger to this guy. The Regs already didn't consider the Bad Batch to really be their brothers during the war. And now Hauser has had this guy, murder several people. According to him, he's the cause of death of several clones, and now Hauser's just expected to get along with him. So I think props to this guy for not just shooting Crosshair on sight. The tension between these two, I think, is relatively tame compared to the level of situation. He has no loyalty to Crosshair. He has no obligation to that guy whatsoever. And so I was very impressed by Hauser's restraint.
Yeah, well, as anybody would be, it's a kid show. You got to qualify everything with that. But just in common parlance, if you're around somebody you knew was a murderer, or even there was like some questionable fratricide situation in a military context, you're going to be in pins and needles around somebody like that, especially if you had firsthand knowledge of some chicanery. It's not like, dude, I am not going to be in the same room with you under no circumstance.
Right. Yeah, so that was very interesting. Also, we get just a brief scene of Echo giving Omega her new weapon, and it is so raw. I loved it, man. It was on the poster. I knew it was coming. We all knew she was going to get the energy crossbow. but it is so cool. It is one of the coolest Star Wars weapons I've ever seen. And so I was so excited to see her get that energy crossbow.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, the handing out of weapons is like a quintessential scene almost to any fiction, right? And no matter who it's handed to, you know, it's not exactly a overlap. But in the original Legend of Zelda game, you walk into that first cave, and the old man says, "It's dangerous to go alone. Here, take this," and gives you just a basic sword. And you could almost say this is somewhat of an analog to that. And it's like, you know, because she had the energy bow before, but now this is the customized. This is the one that she's earned almost, if you will. You know, kind of like a rite of passage in a sense. And, you know, here, take this. It's unsafe to go alone. And also what happens in this case is she's going to do something really cool with it that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. We're really going to get some reward from this energy crossbow. I know we are. I can't wait for the payoff. So we cut to, I'm sure, what was your favorite scene in the episode.
Oh, my goodness.
The clone assassin ship cuts across the skyline and lands on Teth. And man, that ship is just preem. It is so cool. It's got the dark side aesthetic. It's black with the red engines. But to me, the ship it most reminded me of are Padme's Nubian ships. Where they're really sleek and there's nothing on the exterior, and this is just a much more angular version of that, and obviously dark colored, and so I really liked it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, you could just as easily call it the spiritual successor to the Sith Infiltrator, because you know it's going to have stealth capabilities. I was really kind of surprised almost there wasn't some little hover droid following him around somehow.
I was surprised.
Like that.
I was surprised that they gave such a badass ship to just random clone assassin, and presumably they all have it. Like, this is such an iconic design that it's like the Sith Infiltrator to me. It feels like this should be given to some named dark side character, not just some assassins.
Right.
I was very surprised that he got such a cool ship for that.
Yeah, and in all the Star Wars TV that we've seen, they just don't dole these things out. I mean, we're not seeing some new fighter variant. We're not seeing new this. Until now, now all these clones have their cool freighter type ships and shuttles, right? And they're just throwing these ships out willy-nilly, it seems like. But not willy-nilly. I mean, gosh, it's really weird to talk about in that kind of sense, because it makes sense that these guys, with the amount of resources the Empire would have these really cool ships. My sad part is that, you know, we just got this on screen this week. And, you know, back in the old days of playing the X-Wing tabletop game, we could potentially see this on the tabletop within a matter of months. Yep. Now there's no telling. And we'd be looking forward. We'd be talking in the group chat of what the stats of this ship in the board game is going to have.
Yeah, it would be that is, I hadn't thought of that. That is depressing, because this would be a perfect ship to add there. So that's a bummer. Yeah, I wonder, do they have the Bad Batch, the Batcher ship in there? Do we know?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Very crazy, very sad for that game. But they got the Bad Batch in Legion. So I don't know why they couldn't get him an X-Wing. Weird.
Yeah, we could do an episode on that too.
Yeah. So we then learn that we get the clones talking. They're talking about why on Earth they would want Omega. And Omega says that she knows they're running some kind of experiments around M count. And she's like, I don't know what that means. And nobody really knows what it means. And that was something that I was super happy they did. They kept the M count an in-universe mystery, not a well-known fact. You're not a Jedi. Why would you know about this? You know, Rex may know. He indicates that he's heard this mentioned, but that he's not putting two and two together. He may even literally know. He'd be like, oh yeah, M count is how you measure the force sensitivity of somebody. And he probably doesn't know that much, but he knows it has something to do with being a Jedi. And then he would not hear this. He would not hear Omega say M count and associate it with her at all. Because why on earth would he think, oh, they're testing clones for their force sensitivity? He's not putting two and two together because that's a ridiculous thing to try and associate to Rex. And so even if he knows what it is, which I don't know if he does, he is not going to connect the dots because why would you? And so I really liked the maintaining the M count as a mystery, as this, basically just, it's a really obscure piece of knowledge. I thought that the esoteric nature of the M count was a really good addition to this episode.
Yeah, and it speaks to good writing etiquette and principles, right? In other media, it feels like a low-hanging fruit for a bad writer would be some magic know-it-all to pop out. Think of like some robed or hooded figure. M count is this and this and this, and it kind of takes all the mystery away from what this is. Because this is
it's like
be
if you're playing a D&D game, you're metagaming. That's like if Rex knew that's metagaming.
Yeah, yeah. And so this is going to be a big point of contention of figuring this out and determining what the path of Omega is going to be in the future.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I wonder if they had Tech around, if that question would have been answered. I wonder if Tech knows what M count is. If anybody was going to know, it was going to be him. And so it's, it's not like the Jedi archives were all secret. I'm pretty sure that the archives may have been, but it's not like all knowledge about the Jedi was secret, especially academic knowledge, which Tech possessed. And so there definitely could have been something like that. But now that Tech's not around, they have lost that. And they don't have to say it every time, but it's very clear that Tech's death is a massive loss to this group, just in their capabilities.
Right.
So I think we learned why Crosshair's head, it looks like it was hit with a meat mallet. And it must be because they tried to make him a shadow trooper. And he said he didn't take to it. I think that's also why his hand shakes, probably. Is they tried to get inside his head, do the brainwashing thing for the shadow trooper, and didn't work out. And so now we're stuck with shaky hand Crosshair and ground beef head.
Well, and again, this is a kid show. In the very first Star Wars movie, the princess is left alone with this floating torture droid. And that was on the Death Star, right? Think about what they have at Mount Tannis to try and brainwash a clone trooper. Somebody that they don't care about. That is just a blank slate to get them to do what they want to do. Think about what it takes to resist that. You got to be some sort of a Clone Force 99 guy to not do that, right?
Right. Yep. You're absolutely right. So while they're having this conversation, the shadow trooper, the assassin clone, is running around their base. There's no way he didn't get caught. I mean, he's like opening doors, just running really fast, but doors are just opening and closing. And in the Star Wars universe, doors make noises, and they are massive entryways. And so if the light shifted that much in a room, heads would turn. And so I just thought it was really goofy that like 3 or 4 doors move. This guy runs through them and nobody even turns their head. No one's like, I wonder what that was. Not even they're too slow and he just makes it by. No one pays attention in this military outpost that at any moment could get attacked.
He's got a quick save feature and has been able to replay it over and over. He's in the Hitman universe or something.
He has to. So the Shadow Clone gets Omega in his crosshairs. Totally could have killed her, but that's not his mission. He goes back, tells Scorch that, he's there. He's still working on retrieving the clone assassin who's been imprisoned, but that Omega's here. And Scorch says to take her alive. And so he has to try and take Omega alive. And then he is detected. And so the guys come, he's shooting at him, trying to, no, he's not detected immediately. I'm sorry, that's a mistake. They go to speak to the clone assassin that's been captured. They're trying to get information out of him. The clone assassin's trying to turn Crosshair, to turn them against Crosshair by saying, shouldn't Crosshair tell him, calling Crosshair brother. And it's making Hauser very uneasy. So uneasy that he's about to pull his blaster when the not captured assassin clone, the not captured shadow trooper, begins shooting at them. Wrecker turns around, starts putting down suppressing fire, but the clone gets off a blaster bolt that strikes the captured assassin clone in the chest and kills him. And so Hauser and Crosshair and Rex and the Batch are all distracted. Now they're fighting this one guy. And it's a bunch of clones against one guy. These guys are good assassins. They are not, Terminator T-800s. Like, they're not. Right. He is outmatched. There's too many people. And so he's still fighting them really hard. He's throwing explosives. Well, anyways, Hauser gets up in his face with a flamethrower and flamethrowers him. Hauser gets shot, but he drops the flamethrower. And I thought, in a really cool way, the flamethrower ignites a thermal detonator and explodes. And it was visually really pleasing. I thought the whole sequence was a great shot.
Yeah, from the start to finish, he cuts a power thing, and that's when it kicks off the whole action sequence. And, it's really cool to see the clones, even Omega, go to work and get after this kind of thing. And, trying to start the comms, grenades being thrown, blaster bolts going back and forth. Way fun. Masterful work from Disney on this.
Yeah, I think so. And so now the guys know, the Empire knows where they are. They've been tracked, and they need to get out of there because more clones are coming. And we get the big reveal at the end, right before the end of the episode, that the person leading the clones to come and take them on Teth is none other than Commander Wolf. And I thought that was a really cool reveal. I was very happy about that. He's a beloved clone.
Yeah, it was really cool. And just leading all the stuff. It reminds me of like some old war movie past, and I can't even think of it, but like long-lost soldiers on the battlefield coming together again and accomplishing something or looking the other way like they did here. Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And the really good thing about having Wolf come back is we've been waiting, and it's been getting really close to see what happens with him. Since he's in Rebels, we know that he survives. We know that he, leaves the Empire. And so his reintroduction here probably couldn't have come at a better time because we're starting to knock on the door of the last few episodes of the series. I mean, we're down to the last 10 now. And so that is why we really, really needed Wolf introduced as quickly as possible.
Yeah, very cool.
So now on to the next episode. The next episode is Extraction. And it opens up with exceptionally intense music that is the masterwork of the Kyners and sets the scene utterly. I mean, Teth is destroyed. This monastery is destroyed. And the desolation did not hit me until I listened to this music. And it's like, this base is devastated. They will obviously never, ever use this base again. Not only because the Empire's aware of where it is, but because it's no longer structurally sound. And this represents how hard the Empire is willing to come down on all of these clones, on just the collection of clones, on the concept of clones in general. Ones that won't bend to its will.
Yeah, I was surprised the Star Destroyer didn't show up and start deploying everything as valuable as Omega is supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think what you can see, I think there's two reasons there. One, with Omega's value, Hemlock is still having to try and keep her under wraps. Right. Still trying to keep her escape on the down low from Palpatine. But number two, I think that this builds some evidence for the fact that a long-running thread throughout the rise of the Empire era is the Empire not effectively addressing the threat of rebels, the threat of insurgents, the threat of what they would deem terrorists, and just not being able to handle these uprisings and outbursts. And so these clones specifically, should be recognized as that kind of threat. And the Empire is just too nascent to be able to deal with those kinds of threats. And so this further reinforces the theme that we mainly see in Rebels and in the Thrawn novel, just the standalone First Timothy's on Thrawn novel, that the Empire has a problem. It has an insurgency problem, and because the bureaucracy is so big and everybody in the Empire is only out for themselves, they do not recognize it. They do not see the insurgency problem. I mean, we even see in Andor, the opening parts of Andor, they have the corporate the corporate guys go and handle this. What is an insurgency? And we see the Empire cracking down just in the buildup to A New Hope, and that's what brings us to such a boiling crescendo in Rogue One and in A New Hope. This is it for the rebellion. This is their last-ditch effort, because for 15 years the Empire did not have its firm grip, and then they began to tighten the fist, like Tarkin says, and Leia is correct in saying the tighter they get, the more systems will slip through their fingers, because it all comes to a head in A New Hope. They're able to destroy the Death Star, and then the snowball's rolling in the rebellion's direction, and we see it, go all the way to the Battle of Jakku. And until that, the Empire had not effectively addressed the insurgency problem, and that their lack of applying a Star Destroyer, or just their simple fact that all they did was apply 2 dropships worth of clone troopers and a clone assassin, shows their hubris in trying to deal with these uprisings.
Yeah, well said. Very well said.
Thanks. Thank you. So we see the Shadow Trooper dig himself out of the rubble, gets out of the rubble. This guy seems a little stronger than a regular human person would be. I don't know if that was intended to be the message, but to me, that's what I got out of it, because he's moving some big boulders that have collapsed on him. And so yeah. I don't know if it was just, he needed to get out of there, so it's convenient and it can weigh whatever. But to me, it communicated the fact that this guy may have a little bit of augmented strength.
Yeah, could be.
So we know Rex and the boys are trying to find their way off of this spire, and there's always a back way, so they begin taking them through the back way. And then we get a cut to Wolf and the assassin clone having a discussion. And Wolf's very upset with the assassin clone, because he knows the mission is to take Omega back alive, and this place is on fire. I mean, it's destroyed. It doesn't look like that guy it doesn't look like the clone assassin tried to do anything but lay waste to the entire facility.
Yeah, there's not much left. Blowing up everything. Whole place is collapsing around everywhere. It's bad.
Yeah, and so Wolf gets a little chippy with this assassin clone, because the assassin clone really doesn't seem to care. And Wolf is, I'm the commanding officer here now. We need to get Omega, take her alive. And I'm curious why the assassin clone does not seem to be on that take her alive page, because they seem to be brainwashed clones. And he got direct orders from Scorch in the last episode to take her alive, as well as now Wolf is reinforcing that. And so I don't understand why this guy is so gung-ho. I don't know why the conflict between Wolf and the assassin exists, because what's wrong with the assassin clone that he's not following orders? Because you would think brainwashed clone is going to follow orders to a T. It's the same as a droid. Is what I would assume, in that there's no room for error. Oh, he accidentally killed our prime target. So I just don't know what this is supposed to represent. If this program is not working and these clone assassins have some kind of defaults or what. But I was really interested in what they were trying to tell us by having this clone assassin be so willy-nilly with his tactics, and people on screen recognizing that he's being willy-nilly with his tactics.
Yeah, the only thing I can chalk it up to is he disagrees with Wolf's commands. I mean, I think when they're starting to go down into the spire, I don't remember what to say was exactly, but Wolf wants to just seal that off and wait for him to come out the bottom. Gosh, maybe he has, since he's brainwashed, he's kind of a divergent from other clones anyway, and maybe he exists in the same headspace that Clone Force 99 does. And, these guys aren't to be trifled with, right? You got to think outside the box to best these guys. And the Shadow clone is the only one thinking outside the box. The rest of the guys are just kind of on rails.
Yeah, well, and to his credit, he doesn't kill Omega. I mean, he does. He stops them from escaping, like he says later in the episode, and he didn't kill her in his fight against them. I mean, he's 1 versus 8 people. And so he did, I think, the best he could have done. But it's just interesting because he seems to have no remorse for this.
Yeah, he's a machine.
So they know they're being followed, the batch and Rex and the guys. And so Crosshair turns around and says he's going to handle this. And his shaking hand is already getting him into trouble because he cannot. Old Crosshair, one shot, nailed that guy. He's dead. He's fallen off. But Crosshair takes 3 shots at him, can't hit a single one. Really astounding. Like, it's just because the way they obviously, it's a cartoon and it's a kid's show, but they need to communicate that he misses and not missing in the same spot multiple times so it doesn't look intentional. So he hits him like under the arm, over the shoulder, and on the other side of the shoulder. And it's just like, for someone like Crosshair to miss that routinely with that little precision is like crazy. That would destroy that guy psychologically. But anyways, he misses those shots, but he's not going to give up, and he uses an explosive projectile to stick to the wall and blow the guy off. But he falls down and is able to save himself because, we need to keep this guy around.
Yeah, another superhuman thing that he did.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So they have a little escape pod ship nestled away in the rocks on the spire. And when they first get into it, I thought it was the Twilight, man. I thought it was the ship from the original Clone Wars movie. I was like, whoa, that is a great callback. It was not. It was some random little pod ship. I thought the little pod ship thing was really neat, though. It was just it was like a cube. That was it. It was just this big cube that you got in and shot out, and it was just a cockpit with engines.
It's almost like the escape pod on the Millennium Falcon or something, like an add-on ship to something else.
Yes, it is. It's very much like that. It seems like that. And they were calling for help. They were going the plan, it probably doesn't have a hyperdrive, because I bet their plan was to make atmosphere and have Echo pick them up.
Right.
But they get shot down because the assassin clone comes out, shoots their engines with his sniper, and is able to take them down. And so they crash land. And as they're crash landing, Rex calls Echo and says, "We need you to pick us up." But
I wonder how many crashes these people have survived. For regular humans, you get pretty banged up in any crash.
Yeah, yes, let alone
cars,
a spaceship
planes,
crash.
Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, and they survive a lot. I mean, you have to just imagine they've got to have better safety equipment on Star Wars spaceships than we have in airplanes.
And armor,
they're just
too.
There has to be better safety equipment. Well, yeah, armor, but if you drop a tank from 30,000 feet in the air and you fall inside the tank, the armor in the tank didn't really matter to you. Yeah. They didn't help you much. So yes, they have to have much more sophisticated armor. So as they're getting out, Crosshair is asking Omega, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? And Hunter is starting to notice Crosshair's warming relationship with Omega. And Crosshair, to his credit, is displaying some pretty exceptional loyalty to Omega. And so Hunter raises this with Crosshair, and they have a conversation about how he notices Crosshair is a different person when they last saw him, because that's just true. Crosshair is a different person now. Crosshair makes a very interesting point with a line of dialogue where he talks about loyalty means everything to him, and his loyalty to the Republic and then the Empire was exceptionally important to him because of how much he cares about loyalty. And we've heard this over and over from Crosshair. From his point of view, the Bad Batch were the traitors. It was he continued to work for the same people. And so Crosshair says loyalty is important, and that the Empire, it didn't go both ways with the Empire. And he doesn't say this. No, it's not said on screen, but it's heavily implied, is that by saying this, he's also indicating the reason he's, being fatherly towards Omega and being caring for Omega is because he feels a sense of loyalty to her. He probably feels a sense of indebtedness also to her. He probably feels a little indebted to her for helping him escape, but he mainly is reciprocating with this loyalty that he says is such an important value to him.
Yeah, it's really cool to see, and I hope that translates to all the rest of the clones and rescuing them from Tantus too, because before he was somewhat indifferent, right?
Oh yeah, he even leading up. Even during the Clone War, he doesn't care. He's the one that cares the least about regs. Like, Crosshair's just the most jaded member of the group, obviously. And so I think even still having it his way, he'd leave Rex, he'd leave the others. He'd only maybe care about the Batch and Omega for sure.
Another thing I want to mention intermingled with these scenes is the way the Imperial troopers disembark from the shuttles. They have like these hatches open on the bottom, and these lines go down, and they later on they embark back into these ships the same way. And I don't know if we've seen that before in Star Wars. Maybe
looked
I haven't.
very
I missed it,
familiar to me,
but it's a really cool way to get out of these ships as opposed to the whole thing just landing and them coming off an assault ramp or something, right? And I don't know, silly little detail that I like.
Yeah, I thought it was cool too, and I noticed it, but it looked familiar to me. I want to say something more on this Crosshair loyalty thing, though.
Yeah,
I want to go back to that point. That's okay. What I want to say, though, is that I think a reason that Crosshair has such an attachment with Omega is because of his loyalty he feels to her, but also that I think if you take Omega's core value, it is loyalty. I think that Omega represents loyalty as much as Luke Skywalker represents hope, because that is the core value to Luke's character, is hope. He is the new hope, but you can see that throughout the original trilogy that his story is about hope, and he is, as a character, represents the concept of hope. And I think that what they've done with Omega is take a character and have her represent the concept of loyalty, because she cares about her brothers, the Bad Batch, but she also cares in general, in large, about her brothers, the clone troopers. And she does not know these men very well. She doesn't know many of them at all. But she's willing to go back to Tantus. She sees the importance of going back to Tantus and rescuing all of them. And she feels the same sense of camaraderie that the other clones do for each other that was forged on the battlefield over 3 years. And so Omega is just, loyalty is her defining characteristic. And we see such a strong sense of loyalty in all the clones, but we know that she's untampered. And so it also leads me to believe that they took a lot of care in designing Omega's character off of the character of Jango Fett. Because we know Jango Fett is a family guy. I mean, he only cares about himself and Boba Fett, but he is about family values and the value of his family to the end. I mean, Jango Fett's the most Tony Soprano character in Star Wars because he cares about his family. It's the same. It's kind of the Italian mafia, the Italian mafia understanding of family is nothing comes before family. That's the way Jango felt about just Boba, but that's the way the clones feel about each other, and that's the way Omega feels about every clone. And so I really feel like a sense of loyalty is the core aspect of Omega's character. And even you could almost say to a fault in a sense, because she's loyal to Dr. Emery, her oppressor, right? Yes, yeah. She was loyal to Sid, who had proved herself over and over to have not been a trustworthy person. And that's Omega's core flaw, is loyalty to a fault, certainly, and compassion to a fault. So yeah, I think that that's, for better or worse, really where they have taken this character, and I think it's I think it's very, very cool that they were able to do something like that. That they were to make her so archetypical. So the assassin clone continues to pursue them, but Crosshair this is his really, more so than the previous episode from last week. These episodes are really what has proven Crosshair out to be a loyal, member of this group, and that is he proves his mettle by attacking the assassin, tackling him into the river, and they're scrapping with each other all the way down to this waterfall, and it absolutely looks like they're both going to go over. Crosshair can tell they're both going to go over, but he's just trying to eliminate this assassin so his brothers can escape. And so it was really good. It was really cool. They had this art that they had in this scene was stunning. I mean, I think my mouth actually dropped, because they had this vivid imagery of Crosshair being drowned on screen. You see his face, you see his entire reaction, you see his physical struggle, and it's all through the clear water. And that just, the way that they made it look, if you think back to Season 1 Clone Wars animation versus this, it's like it's a completely different television show. I understand it's the same art style, but this is just an astounding shot they visually captured this struggle perfectly.
That's the whole sequence. You can tell that the writers weren't just, these two characters are going to fight. Let's have them change blows and say a couple lines. It was just extremely meticulous, in the sense of Crosshair. Like you said, this is a character-defining fist fight right here. It's really truncated in a sense because it's a kids' TV show again, but like it reminds me of like a culminated fight, like a Rocky or something like that. Or it's just this, one gaining the upper hand of or other. One's about to lose and something happens and it doesn't go the way you think it's going to happen. And to see a near death like that shocked me a bunch too.
Yeah, I thought it was very, very interesting that was the route we went down, but I was happy to see it. And Crosshair, so he succeeds, he wins the struggle, the assassin goes over the edge, and Crosshair's saved. But it's really, I think, what this is supposed to be symbolically is Crosshair having a rebirth. I mean, this is his rebaptism. He's gone under the water through this fight. He's proven himself not just to the Bad Batch, but to all of the clones in this struggle. And so this really seems to be an on-screen manifestation of what was acknowledged by Hunter just a couple minutes before with dialogue, in that Crosshair has had a fundamental change to his character. He is a different person than was introduced to us in the 7th season of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, exactly right. And the hand twitch, I bet, goes away after this, and he's more confident in himself and his abilities.
That would be cool. From this
point forward.
That would be cool. So the guys are on this cliff edge trying to get Echo to locate them, but Wolf and the other ship make it first, and so Wolf steps out with a whole squad of clone troopers and some clone commandos, and Wolf realizes that this is Rex that he's been pursuing, and this gives Wolf a lot of pause, because we saw during the Clone Wars numerous episodes where Rex and Wolf were together. The 501st Legion worked probably the closest with Plo Koon and Wolf's Legion, and so getting to see these two brothers reunited on screen, we know of their relationship prior to this during the Clone Wars. We know during Rebels that Wolf is redeemed and that Rex and Wolf live together after all of this is over with the Bad Batch. It's really touching to see their reunion, but it's really tough, because you know that Wolf represents all of those clone troopers who have stayed with the Empire, and he says it himself, I'm a good soldier of the Empire, and that's just absolutely what they believe, and it continues to be the tragedy of the Bad Batch, is us having to see these beloved clone characters that we've grown to know over 7 seasons of a different show, showing what being a part of the Empire is like, and why, and what literally would have happened and what did happen with the clones and the way that they fell. And so it's a really touching scene and a really touching exchange.
Yeah, it really is. And you can tell that as far as Wolf is concerned, the seeds are planted for what's most likely going to occur in future episodes. Right.
And we're left wondering, what's he going to do now? Because we know he survives in Rebels, and we know that he eventually just sides with. But he's a little nuts. We also need to remember that from Rebels, is that he's the one who calls the Empire and reports Kanan and Ezra and all of them. And so he still has a little bit of loyalty to the Empire. He's also the one who has PTSD flashbacks. And Rex has to calm him down. And so Wolf's redemption is probably made by not getting rid of his chip, or maybe getting rid of his chip later, but Wolf's redemption is probably made during the heat of battle, if I had to guess, just by where we find his character in Rebels. And his chip either was removed, but it was in his head too long, and so he's still having a little bit of the latent effects from that, or his chip's still there. Right. Because he's remorseful and helps fight the Empire off after he reports him, but it's a moment of weakness. It's basically like a flashback. It's like he's back being in service of the Empire. And so that's an important thing for us to see. This character is going to go through a lot in the next 10 episodes. He may not be in every episode, and in fact, he certainly won't be. But over the next 10 episodes, the episodes he's in, he's going to go through quite a bit.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see.
Yeah.
There's a lot to speculate on here.
There is. The last thing I'll say about the episode, the two more things, is we see the assassin clone survived. Kind of anticlimactic, especially since there's so many of them. Why not just kill this guy and make a new one? I mean, we know that they're just normal. They're all just, I mean, again, what if it's tech? I hope it's not. That would be so lame. That would be super lame.
Super lame.
But the only reason to make him survive is he's somebody, right? Because again, there's so many of them. I mean, they're a dime a dozen. They should just be able to kill one and another one pop up and it mean nothing. But we'll see. We'll see if that's the case. And then finally, it wraps up with just like a little bit of recap. There was like nothing from this conversation that was new information, which I thought was really interesting because, I'm watching this, writing my notes down. I'm hanging on to every word of this final conversation in the final scenes, and there's just no new info. It's just, you need to figure out why they want Omega so bad because you need to protect her. And it's like, yep. We know that. That's been the case the entire show. That's the point of the TV show. So didn't get any information out of that exchange. But that's the episode. That's the whole episode. The whole 2 episodes. And, I mean, I'd say these are probably my favorites of the season so far. I think they even beat out the premiere episodes.
Yeah, I don't know where I'm at on that. I really like this. I like the operative in this a whole bunch. I like how capable he was. Like I said, it made me feel like playing some character and watching a video game character going and doing cool things. Like, not really a criticism but it's a trope in a lot of fiction of you take a prisoner back to your home base. Well, that's something you don't do because they have tracker devices or it was intentional and now they can go find them. So, a silly lesson. If you ever have to capture somebody for whatever reason, don't take them to your house.
Right.
It's silly and dumb, but it always leads to bad things. And as it did here, but fun nonetheless is getting to see the introduction. I mean, these aren't just, in season 2 is just a one-off little character who killed himself almost instantly. And now we got another one who did some really cool stuff and all this clandestine operation. It's really cool that it even exists in this universe, that there's some sort of like almost secret operators everywhere and they got these cool ships and doing all this cool stuff. There's lots of opportunity here because the Empire goes away. How much were these guys utilized throughout this almost 20 years, right? And so they age really fast. So they got to be you got to get the most use out of them as you can.
Got to get your bang for your buck.
Yeah.
I always love it. It has to be remembered. And it's an important part of the universe, but that the Empire has to spend money and that all this costs money. And so it's hand waved a lot, but they know that there's a finite amount of time on these clones, like you said. And so they're going to get all of their money's worth. So
I know that's kind of like a silly path to go down on a Bad Batch episode. But again, that's what I focus on is I think there's opportunity here for more stories of what these guys are out here doing in the universe.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree. So that wraps up the meat of our podcast, but we've got a lot of podcasts left because now we have our How the Force Works question.
That's not how the Force works.
So, Colin, our audience knows, the way that How the Force works is we have a Patreon subscriber send in a question, and we answer it live here on the show. And so the question that we had sent in today was from our Patreon subscriber, Loaf, and Loaf asks, pretty simple question, but it's a deep one that every Star Wars fan has asked themselves. What style of lightsaber would you use? And I think we're talking color, hilt material, and how many blades it's got. What's your how many blades do you have? That all of those aspects.
Yeah, this one's I was reading this just now as you're talking, and I'm really torn on what exactly to do or come up with, and there's so much context, there's so much nuance of what your lightsaber, the color your blade means, and then.
I think, they threw all that out the window. That was expanded universe stuff. Now the colors don't mean anything. So
well, but you can want it to mean something.
I'm glad it doesn't. I think that's some Harry Potter nonsense that got thrown into. I think that's the most Harry Potter, your wand chooses you crud that could have gotten put into Star Wars. I don't. I think that, especially in the understanding of what it is to be a Jedi and how the crystals work and that they're naturally grown, the whole, color chooses your job. That's not what being a Jedi is about. Being a Jedi is not about, you got the green one, so you're a guardian. Or you got the yellow one, so you're a sentinel. Or whatever those colors mean. It's much more about your personal relationship with the Force. And so
and I agree with all that. But having a white crystal, you just don't casually stroll into one of those. And if you show up with a red crystal, you don't casually show up with one of those. But that's the case in the expanded universe and in the current canon. Both of, that was the white in the expanded universe was you could just find it, and the reds were synthetic, and now the whites are bled regular crystals, and the whites are redeemed red crystals, which I think gives way more meaning to lightsaber crystals. Is that understanding rather than you found this certain color? And so I want to think that having a purple lightsaber is something special based on that. We've only ever seen one or two, right? So gosh, I don't know. Personally, I was trying to simplify it for you. I was trying to say, don't fret about the color because you don't have a job associated with the color. Well, that's fine. And that's fine. But somebody with a purple lightsaber has some status that all the blues and greens don't, right? I disagree with that. I don't think that's true. I don't think so. We have a completely different understanding of lightsabers. You don't think that there's some goofy Jedi who's having to meditate over and over and over, that is because he's so envious that Mace Windu has a purple lightsaber and he doesn't? I don't think so. I think that the personal relationship established with your crystal means that no matter what color your crystal is, it's perfect for you. That is your crystal. I don't think they are ever envious of another person's crystal in any way. Maybe a lightsaber hilt, because that's all just you make it. You're like, I wish I was way as creative as this guy. I wish I was as creative as, what's the Wookiee's name? What is the Wookiee jet? Gungi. I wish I was as creative as Gungi and had this wooden lightsaber hilt. But I think there is no envy whatsoever between colors. And I think there's no status related to colors. Except, I guess, if you see a white one, then you know how they acquired it. And so maybe there is some envy that they were able to slay a dark side user. And so, gosh, we've seen in the context of a Jedi existing in the Jedi Order, none of them have even seen red ones, except for a handful of them, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then you get into some other discussion of, what if you were a Jedi that wasn't able to report back that you saw a red one? Was it a Sith that showed it to you, or was it just a rogue dark Jedi or something like that? Mm-hmm. And there would be, I would figure in just a basic common Jedi that, like one who, for instance, didn't make it back to the Order, who saw a red crystal, they would be instilled with quite a bit of fear in seeing one of those things. Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I think so. Well, it's like that episode of Visions that we always rave about, The Elder. I mean, those guys definitely had to report back to what they saw, and they probably were the first Jedi to see a red lightsaber in a few hundred years. Yeah. And that's my main point, is that on some level, the color matters in a sense. And we could disagree on that. That's fine. It's whatever. But, gosh, again, I don't know. A blue one would be probably what I'd end up with, but if I were just my human basic self, I'd want something. I don't know if I'd want to be associated with a red one, but I'd still want to figure out how to get a white one. That would be cool. Yeah. And you said you dual wield? I'd want to dual wield, and I mean, gosh, heck, there's even orange ones now, right? We didn't even mention those. We don't even know what that means. It's all just speculation. Because it doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. Whatever. It means something. It means something. they don't do stuff casually like that.
Oh, well,
But-
you're talking about, I understand. You're talking about Balin and
Yeah.
Shinhati's orange lightsaber. I thought you were just
Right.
talking about the orange ones in general. Yeah, there's definitely is something to Balin and Shin's. There's definitely something there.
Right. And then, and then so is at Disney World, when you go, there's 4 different styles of lightsaber that you can build. And the one I always choose, I've done it twice now, is Power and Control. And it's basically you're building a dark side lightsaber, but they try and spin it as not expressly that when you're there doing it. Because, like, you can just, you're a powerful Jedi, stuff like that. I really like Darth Tyrannus' hilt with the bend in it. I don't know if I'd necessarily go with that, but hey, I've got 2 choices, right? So
Yeah, you're right. You can have one with a bend and one without.
yeah. So, I'd want mine kind of, kind of basic. I don't want a bunch of frills, and I don't want extra parts hanging off just to break or having to maintain them. I'd want something basic. So that's me.
Cool. I was able to sit here and reason through mine while we argued, because I didn't know what mine was going to be wanted to be going into it. But now I have a very specific one that I want, and I would like to be a Jedi in the new Jedi Order for the only reason that I would like to get Kylo Ren's crossguard lightsaber and uncorrupt it and have a white, unstable crossguard lightsaber with a black hilt.
Well, that'd be neat.
That is the specific lightsaber that I want is that one right there. I think it'd look great. The unstable white would look super cool.
You and your Gungan friend would have a bunch of fun going and finding that hilt too.
My Gungan friend? I don't understand.
Yeah, you got to go underwater to find it. They threw it. Didn't they throw it?
Oh, sure.
Did she
yeah,
throw
they
it
did.
from
They did.
From the wreckage into the ocean there?
Yep, on Kef Beer.
So your Gungan friend in your little ship would have be a fun quest to go discover that thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that will honestly, I do imagine that Kylo Ren's lightsaber will pop back up sometime. It just got thrown into the ocean. I mean, it's not that. That's not that irredeemable on a small moon in Star Wars. Like, we don't know how big that ocean is, but I imagine that we'll be able to find that lightsaber again someday.
I mean, the dagger that was used to find the spot on the Death Star wreckage, that had been missing for many years, and they still found that. I mean, and artifact hunters, that's a profession in the Star Wars galaxy. So
It is. So, Loaf, we really appreciate the question. And if anyone listening would like to send us a question, it is super simple. All you got to do is head on over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station and find the Patreon tier that you like best. Start sending in those questions. So, our next segment, mentioned at the beginning, is our HoloNet news segment. And so we're going to hop into that right now.
You made the HoloNet.
So, Colin, I mentioned it at the top of the show, and I think it just is the story we should talk about at the very beginning because it's extremely sad. It was reported by a lot of news outlets, not just Star Wars news outlets, that Jake Lloyd, who played Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace, has been in rehab for 10 months following a psychotic break that he had last year. And it's just, it's a terrible story.
yeah, and gosh, there's been stories over the years that he has been mentally unwell for quite a while, and it is quite harrowing to hear about.
Yeah, it is. And, he went through so much during The Phantom Menace and the backlash surrounding that movie. And it is very difficult to be a child actor. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that this kind of thing happens way too often for child actors. And so it's just really disappointing that this has to happen to anybody, but especially somebody who is related to Star Wars like this.
Yeah, this article talks about being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and that's such a debilitating ailment. I don't even fathom what life is like suffering from something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really sad. Our prayers and our thoughts are with Jake Lloyd and his family, for sure. And we hope everybody's are. And as this story continues to develop, we'll have new information, and we'll see what happens. We'll keep everybody updated.
Yeah, it says he's still a fan of the franchise too, so that's good.
Yes, yeah, that's good. And he could very easily not be. I mean, with the relationship that he's had, with the backlash that he received, but very happy that he is.
Yeah.
So our next story is a pretty exciting one. Daisy Ridley, in a recent interview, has said that the new Jedi Order movie could start filming either late 2024 or early 2025, and she will be reading the script imminently.
Boy, that's awesome. Wow. I can't wait for that to happen, really.
I mean, 2024 is really fast. I'm kind of surprised. I'm happy, but that's a quick film time with them.
What that means
is
everything's coming together. You know, however far along the script is, you know, especially with movies of this caliber. And I'm just making stuff up. I don't know, but it feels like they do a lot of rewrites. You know, with such a big project, and such a loyal diehard fan base, they want to get it right. So, before they spend a bunch of money on set design and costumes and paying actors and this and that, the script's got to be, you know, creme de la creme, if you will. Right.
Yeah, no, I wanted them to take their time. I'm looking forward to it because I think Stephen Knight's a really good writer, and I'm excited to see the story continue in that time period. And so I'm really ready for them to start filming that movie, and I'm really ready for it to come out. I'm pumped. So I can't wait. It's going to be pretty good. Our very last news story for the day is about The Mandalorian and Grogu, the upcoming movie that's set to come out next year, 2026. I cannot remember now what the rumor mill was saying about that premiere. Do you remember, Colin, if it was next year or the year after?
I thought it was next year.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to say 2025. If it's not coming, we're at least hoping that it comes then. But Brendan Wayne is one of the guys who plays Din Djarin in the suit. He's not Pedro, but everybody knows Pedro's usually not the guy in the suit. Brendan Wayne is the guy in the suit a lot of times alongside Lateef Crowder. But Brendan Wayne is a guy who's kind of always given Mandalorian scoops. Like, he likes talking about it. He really loves his job. He posts about it, The Mandalorian and his work on it on social media a lot. So that's how some people kind of knew that they were getting ready to film, because he was working out and getting ready on a training regimen to do this. And so he was recently on the Chataween podcast, and he did a 90-minute interview with them. But the most important tidbits that we got out of this interview are that in June, the movie's going to start filming, which is insane. I mean, that's super close. So we're going to start getting just a flood of rumors and news in 3 months. And then the second, I think, even bigger piece of news is that he says that he doubts a 4th season of The Mandalorian is coming. And so there were some rumors and reports that maybe we were going to get a 4th season and leading into the movie. And now it looks like we're only going to get the movie. It's, you know, it's a bummer, but it's not surprising. But it's also not unsurprising. Like, I think it could have gone either way. I think they could have done another season, or they could have not have. And I think that all of their information surrounding these decisions is way too clouded for us to understand. We have no idea why they wouldn't want a 4th season, or what the plot of this movie is. Was this movie a 4th season turned into something? We just have no real indication. And so I really don't know whether to be pleased or bummed about it, other than bummed that we're not getting more Star Wars content.
Yeah, I want to believe that we're getting more, right? To me, there's 2 distinct plot lines, and I want to see both of, you know, Mandalore being resurrected, and then Grogu and Din Djarin's story, and Imperial Remnant too, something with Thrawn. Yeah.
I mean, something we're gonna get some kind of combo of those characters one way or another. So there was another news story that came out while we were recording this, and so we have to talk about it. This is the second time in 2 weeks that a story is dropped while we were recording, and so that's pretty interesting. But this surprises me a lot. This is a really, really interesting update. We don't have a lot of confirmation on this. This is just out here as the first indication of this news story coming. So I want everyone to take this with a grain of salt. But does anyone remember who Patty Jenkins is? She is involved in the Wonder Woman franchise, obviously. She made those movies. And she was set to direct Rogue Squadron, a X-Wing, Rebellion, New Republic-focused movie about X-Wing pilots. And that movie was canceled. We got confirmation from Lucasfilm that movie was no longer happening, and they never really confirm cancel, but they always say, oh, shelved, or we never really get rid of ideas. Well, most of the time that's just not true. But this time, that seems to be the case, because Patty Jenkins is saying that Wonder Woman 3 being put on ice means she's back developing Rogue Squadron for Lucasfilm.
Yeah, that's exciting, because this is one of the movies I was most looking forward to.
It's a really cool concept, and she referenced her father's time as an actual dogfighting pilot, and so so this meant a lot to her. She wanted to tell this kind of story, kind of a Top Gun and Star Wars kind of story, and so it's really interesting to just see this pop up though, because we got a lot of confirmation from Kathleen Kennedy specifically that says it just didn't happen, referring to Rogue Squadron in the past tense, meaning it didn't happen, it's not gonna happen. But that's clearly not the case, or at least that's not what Patty Jenkins is saying. We'll have to see what comes out in the next couple days surrounding it, but they haven't Lucasfilm hasn't come out and said that she's crazy or that she's lying, and so there might be some truth to it.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, I hope we get some news in the future on this and how this came about. Maybe with Dave Filoni doing his stuff, being that creative director, he was able to resurrect something like that. There's a lot of stuff changing in the film world. The whole superhero genre has not had a good run this year, and I can't imagine them studios wanting to spend money on Wonder Woman 3, and so doing something like a Star Wars project might be right up her alley.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm excited about it. I want that movie to happen. As we always say, more Star Wars is good Star Wars. And so I hope that that's the case, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm very curious to see how this gets developed. So that wraps up our HoloNet news. That was an exciting update that we got in the middle of recording this. And so those are our raw, unfiltered thoughts about the Patty Jenkins news. But now we're heading into our last segment. And so our last segment is always our Star Wars moment of the week. So, Colin, let's hop right into the Star Wars moment of the week.
We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, Colin, what is your Star Wars moment of the week?
Mine's pretty basic. I went to and I think I might tell this one every year. Again, I don't know, but it's what happened. So, for one of my other businesses, I go to a convention, and it has to do with retail sales. And, on the face of it, doesn't have anything to do with Star Wars, but there's so much add-on things like toys and Legos and this stuff of just get to see some of the stuff that's out there and available for sale in my retail space of hardware. So, I got to walk the show floor and get to see what was out there. And there's actually quite a lot, from socks and underwear to, of course, Legos, like I said, but even everything in between, like keychains and little hats and koozies for your mug and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, it kind of ties in with my same moment of the week from last year, like toys for kids or something. But this is something that they're trying to market to, again, that it's kind of like an adjacent space for add-on sales and stuff. And it's not just kids who enjoy Star Wars and buy stuff for Star Wars stuff. We just had like a 10-minute conversation about what lightsaber we wanted. Right.
Right.
Of course, there's nothing at these conventions that looks at that. But even if it's just like a casual pin or a keychain or something, or a little koozie for your cup, there's Star Wars stuff that's everywhere. And getting to see that stuff from like a wholesale perspective is really cool.
Yeah. No, I bet it is. I bet that is really cool. My Star Wars moment of the week, I had a pretty exciting one. This one came out of nowhere. I had a really good time. I went over to my buddy's house, who has a giant collection of retro video games and retro consoles, and I got to play the original Shadows of the Empire game on his N64. And, we talked about that game. It was this big multimedia project in the 90s, between episodes 5 and 6. It's got a comic and a novel, and that's where Prince Shizor got introduced. It's a pretty good story. It's a very interesting story. But this was it was a really fun game. I didn't play the whole thing, obviously, but I got to get into the very beginning of it and see Han Solo talking with Kyle Katarn, and it was just, with Dash Rendar, and it was just really, really cool to get to see and play this classic Star Wars game that I'd never had the pleasure of getting my hands on before. I had never gotten to play this. I knew the plot line, I'd watched it before, but I'd never gotten to see it, and so it was really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it. When did this game come out? 1996? So I have real vague memories of this game. I was scrolling through pictures on just a Google search, and it had the a Hoth battle. Maybe it's this game. Maybe I'm thinking something wrong, but I remember me and my friends playing this Hoth battle.
Yeah, it opens with that Hoth battle. It's the first level.
Yeah, okay, that's exactly right. And getting to reenact those scenes is really cool.
Yeah.
Really
no, it is. It is.
Cool.
I saw someone, this was months ago, and I'm not going to remember their Twitter handle, unfortunately, but they were talking about how the Battle of Hoth may be the most replayed movie moment in a video game of any movie ever. Because the Battle of Hoth has been replayed in, more than a dozen Star Wars video games. I mean, much more than a dozen. I think this guy listed maybe 20 games where the Battle of Hoth takes place. And so I thought that was really, really interesting too, was that he has a point. It probably is the Battle of Hoth. But when you factor in all the arcade machines that Star Wars has had, and, I don't think he used pinball machines, but pinball machines or anything else, I mean, the Battle of Hoth really has been replicated over and over and over in video games. That's
just so iconic. Shooting that lariat lasso tether out and taking down the AT-AT. It's really cool.
You're right. Well, because it's iconic, but it's also it's a mechanic that was easily replicable in early video games, and it's unique enough that where else are you going to get that concept? If you see some giant walking thing get tied up in its legs with string, it's Star Wars. You know that the person got it from Star Wars. Star Wars was the first to do that specifically, and so anytime it happens anywhere. We saw it in Marvel Civil War when they're trying to bring Ant-Man down and Spider-Man makes the reference to the Battle of Hoth. It's just anytime any big thing is going to be tripped, it is immediately going to be associated with the Battle of Hoth. That's how ubiquitous Star Wars is with culture, and that's how ubiquitous that specific moment is. And so the uniqueness of that really allowed something, if you played all of these games where you got to fly a spaceship or a plane, or you got to shoot things down, they're all a little repetitive because they're all the same. This added enough uniqueness to make it exciting. And I think that's part of the reason that people have wanted to play it in video games so many times.
Yeah, very fun, very cool.
Yeah, definitely. So, Colin, that wraps up the show for this week. We appreciate you guys joining us, listening to us talk about the Bad Batch Season 3, Episodes 6 and 7. Like I said, I think these are probably my favorite episodes of this season so far. It was a really good set of episodes. We got a lot of info. We learned a lot about Crosshair. And I'm really, really ready to sink my teeth into the second half of this season. We're not at the halfway point yet, I don't believe, but we're very close. I think we're actually we are at the halfway point. And so it's all countdown from here. We've got less on the backslide than we do on the upswing, and so it's it's going to be a bummer. I mean, it is going to be a bummer. The Bad Batch is almost over. We're knocking on the door of the final season of this TV show.
And we need
or
an
the final episode of this TV show.
Pronto.
Soon. Very soon. Acolyte's going to be right afterwards. There's a lot of Star Wars this year. We've got a lot of really good Star Wars this year. Yeah, we are.
So much.
There's 15 episodes, so
up.
We're at the halfway mark for sure.
Good. Yeah, I can't wait to see what all is going to happen. I think we know culmination on Tantus, but past that, not really sure.
Right. We've got another two-parter coming up on April 3rd, by the way, everybody. And I already told Colin in a private conversation that I betted these 2 episodes was where we got Ventress. So now my next Ventress bet is going to be episode 10 or 11. Identity Crisis or Point of No Return. Identity Crisis just sounds like a Ventress named episode.
Right.
So that wraps up the show, and everyone listening, we appreciate your continued listening of the Star Wars Station. We love that you come and visit us every week to talk Star Wars, and we appreciate all of our listeners. If you've made it this far, then you're probably a fan of the show, so please leave us a 5-star review on Apple, on Spotify. This is how we grow. This is how we beat the algorithm. This is how we continue to add new listeners to Station Nation. You guys can also find us on YouTube at Star Wars Station. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Station Media. There's an Indiana Jones game coming out. There's a Star Wars game coming out. We're going to have some stuff to play on there very soon. We are also on Discord. You can find the link to that Discord in the bio of this podcast. You can also find us on Facebook. We've got Star Wars Station Facebook page and a Facebook group, Star Wars Station Cantina. And finally, we've got a website for you guys to visit. That's StarWarsStationPodcast.com. And it's a beautiful website that Colin designed for us. And so we'd love for you guys to go check that out. Find stickers, find t-shirts, find our episode backlog. You can find it all there. And Colin, you got anything else?
No, I think you nailed it. Gosh, lots of Warhammer stuff going on. Warhammer Station, check that out.
If you're a Warhammer fan, definitely check all of that out. Warhammer.station on Instagram. Warhammer underscore, is it Warhammer underscore station or WH_station on Twitter?
Gosh.
Put you on the
Warhammer
spot,
Station, yeah. I just look at stuff on there. I'm not really a social media person.
WH_station on Twitter.
And WarhammerStation.com points you in the direction of everything.
Absolutely. So guys, thank you so much for engaging with us. Thank you so much for listening to us. And until next week, stay wizard.